Hello everybody, and thank you for joining us in today's video. Today we are going over chapter 3 of Father Miguel Fuentes' Fatherhood in Crisis, in which we answer the question, how does the father affect the child's affective maturation, the respect for authority, and their psychosexual inclinations? Now, Father Fuentes begins this chapter by referencing famed doctor and professor Aquilino Polaino Llorente, when he says that the lack of interaction between the father and the child gives rise to numerous voids in their psyche. This later results in problems within the child's emotional, cognitive, and social development, which can, and many times does, lead to psychological disorders. The next point he makes is saying that the father allows the child to become aware of reality and to overcome his or her temporary rooting in simply the intrinsic desirability of things. Now, this is to say that how many times do we see that children, when they have a need or there's something that they want, it's kind of just a tunnel vision in which they don't focus on any external factors other than what they want. No? And they're not able to see, right, because of the lack of maturity, because they're children, that their needs or their wants many times affect others in a negative way or in a way in which demands too much of them, right? The presence of the father allows them to take a holistic view of things and to see, wait, no, I need to have other people's necessities and other people's interests along with mine and even above mine, right? To have that selflessness. Father Fuentes says that the loving demand of the father increases the child's self-confidence, allows them to overcome any initial uncertainty, and it allows them to discover that they can do much more than just the bare minimum or the mediocre, right? The father sees all of the potential within their children, and it is his job to not exalt the child when they're not doing or they're not fulfilling that potential, right? It's his job to then allow them to see that you're doing good, but you could do much more, right? And it creates a very healthy ambition within the child. It allows them to see that they are capable of doing great things. He continues by saying that this is a great, great problem because, and we referenced this in the last chapters as well, by saying that for those men, right, that didn't have the formation of their father, how are then they going to be able to be good fathers and to be good husbands, right? It's difficult to come from the lack of fatherhood to then become a father and a husband. And not only does it affect men, but also women, right? Because within their childhood, they didn't have the example and the role model of what the father should be and the husband. So when it's time for them to start looking for a husband, for a father of their children, how are they going to be able to make that correct decision and to make those discernments? Now, moving on to the second point, Father Fuentes emphasizes how the role of the father plays a great role in the formation of respect for authority within the children. He says that the masculine authority is necessary to control the excess of emotions that children have, and especially boys, right? And it teaches them self-control, right? To recognize that authority of the adult. And when this disappears, at many times the life of these boys can become chaotic, right? And let me expound on that. If these boys don't know how to respect an authoritative figure, and especially the principles and the rules that this authoritative figure wants to impose on the child's life, that's where chaos comes, right? And that is to say that these rules and principles come from people that care and love and put those rules in place because they have the child's best interest in mind, right? The parents, priests, coaches, teachers, grandparents, whatever role model. And if they don't know how to respect those rules, they don't know how to acknowledge, right, what's good for them. And they don't know how to then use that when they become adults. So it's kind of this chaos, it's an anarchy. He continues by saying, it is the father's responsibility to obtain what is necessary so that the family can live. And this point is especially important because, again, it sets the father as a role model for these boys so that they can know, once it is their time to be husbands and fathers, what they should aspire to, right? What they should be trying to attain, not only for themselves, but out of love for their family and for their children. And when you have this void present, right, when you don't have the positive figures in their life, and you don't have the role model of the person that provides for the family, that void is going to get filled by something or someone. And at many times, the thing that fills this void is something that has a negative effect on the children, right? How many instances do we see? It's very common that members of gangs that enter when they're 15, 16 years old, it's because they didn't have that paternal figure. They had no fraternity. And so they need to fill that with something, right? And they see a gang or a gang leader as that opportunity for them to have somebody that cares about them. When in reality, they're just dooming themselves. Now, just to summarize, we had the first point, which is effective maturation. The second point, which is the father's role and the respect for authority. And the third point is how the father influences the psychosexual development of children. He says that the rejection and absence of the function of the father carries with it the rejection of the difference between the sexes, right? And the valuation of the social myth of the homosexual ideology as a sign of modernity, right? That is to say that the father can put very clear boundaries on how homosexuality and the household, the homosexual household, is something that is wrong and not just something that is of the times, right? And without that, a child isn't as easily gonna be able to see, right, the difference between this wrong and right. He references Joseph Nicolosi when he says that the correlation between homosexuality and the father that was absent or virtually absent, and by this he means a father that was there but wasn't really there, right? That didn't give interest to his child, that didn't dedicate time to his child, is extremely high, right? This correlation. And at many times, because he's a psychologist, parents would come to him and say, please, help my child. My child needs help, and you have whatever skills necessary to help him. But really, it was many times in which he said, there's not much I can do. You need to ask yourself, right? Have I been a good father? Have I been a good parent? Have I been there? Have I dedicated time to my child? Right? So it first needs to be an intrinsic analysis of the parent figure and of the father. Now I want to finish this last point of psychosexual development by breaking into two main topics. First is the effect on the women, and secondly, on the males. First, regarding the women, he says that because femininity is realized and defined in the face of masculinity, the father forms daughters in strength and wisdom, right? Aurora Pimentel says that a girl brought up without a father has less self-assurance, a low self-esteem, and demands much less from men, and in turn falls before the first marriage or promise of sporadic love, right? So kind of what we referenced before, when these girls then become women, how are they going to know to look for the proper husband and the proper father, right? It affects the rest of her relationships because she now has a damaged notion of what a partner is, right? And so it's hard to recover from that. And referencing the boys, he says that the father plays an extremely important role in moderating the relationship between mother and son, right? This relationship is essential. However, it cannot be absolute, If it is absolute, then there's going to be a child that never left the mother's lap and is not able to realize what reality is and to function in society. Right? The father needs to open the child to the necessary relation with the world. Right? Without this, they're deprived of a very essential part of their formation. Father Fuentes finishes a chapter by referencing a famed psychologist when he says that after taking a subgroup of 120 male patients that all deal with the problem of homosexuality, it was only in 2 or 3 cases where he could definitively say that there was a positive relationship between the father and the son. So we see how important this relationship between father and son is, so that they can affirm their sexuality and their sexual identity. Right? They need to be formed, they need to be loved in order to know the true identity of a husband and a dad. As always, I would like to remind you that in the description of the video below, you can find a link if you would like to learn more about Father Fuentes and even consider getting a physical copy of the book. Thank you so much, and God bless.